Welcome back to another Habs Summer Target. This is Coach Franchise directly from Thailand, along with Marko Larabi from Hawkesbury and Mr. Enortap from Toronto. Welcome, both of you. Thanks to join me tonight. Marko, what is the subject?
Well, Coach, I was watching your live stream yesterday with Enortap. You guys had a good discussion. You were talking about the different phases, of a rebuild, and you guys were talking about how essentially, the first phase of the Montreal Canadiens rebuild is done, right? Like the what you could call the asset collection phase of the rebuild is done, meaning they've traded NHL players that in order to gain either younger players or draft picks and things like that, right? After drafting Demidov here, I think the idea is that okay, so the first phase is done. Now we're heading into the second phase, which is the roster construction phase, where you're taking all the assets that you have, and then you're starting to build what eventually will be a competitive roster. I thought that was very interesting, and I think for Habs fans, it would be fun for us to double click on that idea and let's actually take a look at the roster, what we think will be the roster this year and maybe even next year. And then we'll start kind of thinking, okay, so which pieces are going to be coming out? Which pieces are going to be coming in? And that gives us a really good picture of overall what are the assets that Montreal has? Like, what does the roster look like? And that gives us a good idea of what is Montreal missing? Like, what is the missing ingredient that we think Montreal needs in order to get that competitive lineup in order to eventually make the playoffs. So we'll be digging into that, Coach. We have some lineup cards that we're going to take a look at, and I don't know if we're going to agree on everything, but it should be a fun conversation.
I agree with you about this, Marcos. Let's starting right away and go on the roster of the season 2024-2025 for the Montreal Canadiens. This is 13th forward, already signed contract with the Montreal Canadiens. This is what, Marco, like you said, we need to maybe make some kind of modification. We can maybe have a couple of players be traded, and maybe one of them or two of them at the end of the season or at the trade deadline at the end of the season. Let's start with Marco.
And before we get a whole bunch of comments on the lineup, there could be some changes here, right? Like you could see I don't think we'd like to see Anderson in the top six, but it's possible, that he ends up in the top six and maybe Wah drops to that third line. We're not saying these are the exact lines here, Coach, but these are, what we expect will be the lineup. Looking at that, I think it's clear that, so you're looking at Dvorak as a, free agent at the end of the year. Armia is also, it's his last year as well in his contract. It's not impossible that they would maybe re-up Armia. Again, even though they're not in that stage where they're looking necessarily to liquidate assets like Dvorak and Armia just to get picks. I'm just not sure if Dvorak is going to be part of that long-term plan, right? Like somebody that you would want on the team when we think it's going to be competitive. It really depends how he does this year too, right? Like, listen, is it impossible that they keep Dvorak after this year? It's not impossible, right? But I would be surprised. So for me, obviously Anderson and Gallagher are the two pieces that are really problematic in terms of salary cap, but I don't think you're going to be able to kind of do anything about that there. So, let's say Dvorak is gone, then in that case, now you have a little bit of a hole in your third line center towards the end of the year or going into next year. And then, let's assume that they're not going to re-sign Armia, and let's even assume that they don't re-sign Jake Evans, because Jake Evans, I think, he does have value, right? Like he's a pretty solid fourth line center, but Montreal is going to have so many players pushing for that spot, like whether you're talking about Owen Beck, whether you're talking about Oliver Kapanen, these are players that are going to be pushing, right? So for me, I would say let you eliminate those three guys, including Evans and maybe even RHP. To be honest, he'll be maybe fighting for a spot as well. I don't know, Enortap, anybody else that you would think doesn't make it to the starting lineup all the way through the year?
Yeah, I think you hit on the majority there, Marco. Obviously, when you look at RHP, you look at Evans, you look at Dvorak and Armia, they all have this 1 year left on their contracts. Obviously, part of the reconstruction process, and I would add a couple more things in a second, but part of it is also clearing yourselves of some of these contracts that are a little bit more weighty in terms of the salary cap. And I think that that's the direction that they're going to take. They've done that in the last couple of years, so the plan is sort of set forward for us. I mean, what you get for that, we don't know yet. Obviously, it'll depend on how desperate teams are, but I mean, you can rest assured somebody like Armia will draw some attention. Perhaps somebody like a journeyman like Evans that can win face-offs for you and is reliant on both ends of the rink is going to be very helpful for some team. The other thing I would add to all of this would be, as part of the reconstruction phase, is they're slowly but surely getting their young talent all under contract and very cap-friendly contract. And we've seen that with Caulfield, Suzuki prior to him, just recently with Slafkovsky. Right now, I think a big onus should be on trying to get, obviously, Xhekaj signed up as well. I think that what you're doing is you're securing your youth for the future. So that's another component of the reconstruction that, sometimes not that we overlook it, but we're looking more just at the players that are there, not looking 2 or 3 or 4 years sometimes down the road. But I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the players there. I think Pezzetta, as much as you love his energy and whatnot, I mean, he'll be here this year. I sincerely doubt he'll be here moving forward after that.
I don't know. For me, Coach, and maybe it's a good chance to go and look at the free agents that are going to be open for next summer. But again, like if you're looking at kind of what's available next summer, we know that Montreal is going to have a little bit more room to maneuver. Looking at kind of what you have here in terms of center depth, because again, if we're looking at, we need to replace a center, because I'm not sure you want Beck playing your third line center and then your fourth line center is Kapanen or something like that. That's a lot of youth. Like that's basically all 4 of your centermen are going to be under 25, or Suzuki's just going to be over 25 by then. So I'm not sure if that's a recipe for, again, we've seen the Ottawa Senators kind of example, right? Where you're just going with all the players that you drafted and you're not surrounding them with leadership. That's why, like this summer, not that I was super in favor of re-signing Sean Monahan, but in a way, it wouldn't have been a terrible thing until I saw that he signed for 5 years. That changed. That also made it easier to swallow. Looking at these guys, for next year, there's not a lot of elite centers, right? You got John Tavares, you've got Draisaitl. Brock Nelson can play a little bit of center, but man, I don't know how many more years he's got really to provide a lot of quality. And that's pretty much it, guys. Like you don't have a lot of Sam Bennett. I would be shocked if the Florida Panthers don't re-sign Sam Bennett. But to me, this would certainly be somebody that I would target for sure. And I think would be a great fit in the Montreal top 9. But this kind of brings my point about Dvorak, right? Like if you're Montreal and you're looking for a third line center as a bridge until Beck, Kapanen are potentially ready to do that in a year or two, who do you guys see on here that would be available? And would Dvorak be the better solution if you can get him in? So even if it's 3.5, for 2 or 3 years, I'm open to discussion, but who else do you guys see that could come in and play that role?
Kent Hughes said the maximum I can give to him is 3 years. I can deal with that until we make all the modification. So for me, if you go to next year, the door is only 2 years for the Montreal Canadiens. I'll be disagree with your proposal about Dvorak. I will go with my pipeline. I use Alex Newhook. I use Owen Beck. Give them play. We don't go nowhere anyway. And then 2025, 2026. And then rebuild from that part over there. And then go get a low 1-year deal. A center in NHL. If you want to have a veteran, take the spot of Jake Evan, example, Ken Pumping, third line, fourth line. But again, gave those TOI for them. And you have Alex Newhook can cover you as a center. Look what Alex Newhook did at the second half of the season, driving his teammate beside him. He drive the Joshua Weddings. He make other players better around him. I think he have a really good second half when he get back from his injury. I was a bit impressed about this. Yes, you have to improve his face-off, but it takes time to become a 48 or 49% of the face-off. For me, I use the pipeline for that transition until we get there. I would be out of the Christian Dvorak.
To me, and I think this is why it's an interesting exercise, right? All of a sudden, so if we go with coach's premise, which is, okay, you're going to 25, 26. We've heard the management team saying that they want to be competitive this year. They want, even for 24, 25, they want to take a step. That's Kent Hughes' words. They want to take a step. So we go past, and now we're in 25, 26. Now you're going to integrate 2 rookie centers into your lineup, because if you think this year there's pressure to take a step, wait until you see 25, 26.
Not
Even more pressure.
necessarily. You can put Newhook third center. Again, you put Owen Beck fourth center.
So this is where I was going, right? Is if you do that, so let's say you move Newhook to center. So if Coach, you can go ahead and move in there if you want. All of a sudden, you have Dach We haven't even mentioned Dach yet, right? Dach is, I think we all love Kirby Dach. He's probably actually one of my favorite players on the Habs. Devastated when he was injured in the first game last year, right? But there's a lot of question marks. You know, he hasn't played a full season at center ever in the NHL. He hasn't really played a full season at all in the NHL. The whole purpose of this exercise, guys, is we're talking about, okay, so Montreal's collected all these assets. We all agree they have tons and tons of assets, including draft picks, including players in their pipeline. So the question is, what are the holes in the lineup? What are the weaknesses in the lineup? Looking at this, do you not agree that there's a little bit of concern at center still? Do you think that Montreal is set at center right now? I don't think so. I'm not convinced.
They have Suzuki, Dach, Newhook, Beck, Kapanen, Michael Edge. It's 6 the center right there.
I think Marko is more referring to the fact that either the 2024-25 or 25-26 year. You're right, Coach. I think when you look at it, and I think realistically, if we look at the 26-27 year, that's when these pieces start to fit a little bit better. Players are going to be in their right chairs because that's a concern as well. We had Newhook on the second line, which was kind of a lot to hope for. I think even possibly Roy on the second line is a lot. I mean, he's always risen to the occasion, but we don't know whether that'll actually materialize. But once you start putting in, Demidov in there, Beck will be in there. Ideally, what I would like to see, just going back to Marko's question, is you have a couple lines where you got players that can play both either the wing or center for a number of reasons. For me, always possession of the puck has been an important thing. And if these guys can win faceoffs and know how to play, the 200-foot game both ways, those are invaluable. We saw it this year with Florida. They were deep all four lines, and that's because they had players that could rise to the occasion. I think what the solution is, and I think this is what Hughes is moving towards. We even move it back to this year, 24-25, he's going to look for something that he can do, either free agent that's on the cheap or some kind of trade.
I think Kent Hughes has made it pretty clear that he wants to reward this team that did pretty, they put in a lot of effort last year. Like the results weren't there, but they're happy with the direction that the team is going, right? So they, if possible, again, they didn't want to break away from their plan, like Marchessault, for example, giving him 5 years and whatever the amount that he ended up getting. At some point, guys, Montreal and Kent Hughes, they need to put a winning lineup on the table here soon. I know this year there's still going to be a little bit of patience, but he said it. They want to see progress. They want to see them take a step, or even 25.6. They're going to need to take a real step. And to answer your question, Enortap, do they have a lot of good center depth? I'm very confident that some of those centers are going to hit, right? They're going to play in the NHL. I'm just not sure that if Dach, for whatever reason, can't do the job as a second line center, I'm not super confident yet that somebody's going to be able to do that in the existing assets that they have in the next 2 to 3 years. And if Montreal is going to be competitive, that's kind of important.
Wow, we said a lot of things about that show already, but my final question for you guys is about what is missing for the Montreal Canadiens.
What do you think, Coach? Like, what do you think is missing?
Still missing for me is a PK players, then a top 6 forward, and then I would say more grits at the bottom 6. I think this is another area of the game they don't have. If you look about Newhook, Roy, Gallagher, Anderson on the pipeline, the only way he could bring that kind of grits is Jacky, but he's not ready to be with Montreal, I believe, next year or the next 2 years. This is the kind of player I was targeting if I was Kent Hughes and Joe Gordon. Marko?
For me, Coach, I disagree. I think Montreal has enough players in their system that are going to play in their bottom 6, whether it's utility players. Like, there's a lot of character players in the organization. Even though they drafted Demidov, I still think they're missing one quality top 6 player. I would feel a lot more comfortable if it was a center, because it just gives you that much more flexibility, because everything I said about Kirby Dach and Newhook, I'm just not 100% sure that they're going to play top 6 center in the NHL. Enortap?
Well said. For me, it's going back to the whole definition of roster construction. And I think, as we said before, they've done a good job of acquiring some assets. It's now an evaluation period for them, and they have to see they have to leave some room for some of the youth and to sort of come up and demonstrate what they can or cannot do. Now, it might be, closer towards the end of the year. It might be the first 10 games of the year before they lose a year of their ELC. Some players, whatever the situation is, you need to see these players and evaluate, can this person fill this particular chair? If not, then we have to look at plan B or plan C, whatever that might be. I think for the upcoming year, I still think Hughes is not done. I still believe that he will make one type of acquisition. It's no secret that he's aiming for a top 6 forward, possibly right wing. It would be my guess. And you're probably going to have a player or two that are going to be playing out of their regular positions in terms to accommodate all that. But it's a stopgap in the meantime. If they work out, because maybe they go the prospect route from some team, and it might cost them, obviously, to get that, as we're finding out. I think it's something worth exploring, because if that player does catch on and it fits perfectly into what our intentions are in terms of what the build up here should be to reconstruction, then it's going to be an excellent job moving forward. That's what I would say. We got to give some of the youth an opportunity to show what they have, and then do a proper evaluation in being ready for the 26-27 season. I think that's the critical year where you have to make a lot of noise. I know we've talked about patience, Coach, in the past, and I think that you're absolutely right on that. We do have to be patient, but in that particular year, you have to be a team that is maybe won't win the cup that year, but is going to be significant in terms of how they perform in the playoffs.
Overall, the missing piece to become that kind of team to make the NHL playoff. So a rebuilding, it's not like only 3 years, 4 years, it's like longer, because you always to find the best roster to compete every single year. One thing I would say overall is the pipeline. I think they will have to pick players from outside the pipeline. That's what we're going to talk about the next show of the Habs Summer Target. What kind of player they can looking for via trade by UFA, and to add that kind of best team they can get with all the players they have already. So, Marko, your last word of this show tonight?
Thanks, everybody, for joining. A little double click on what the Montreal Canadiens are missing, and we're interested to hear what you have to say. So please leave us your comments, and we'll look to you to join us for next time.
Thanks so much to both of you to join me for another great Habs Summer Target. I can wait to see you until the next time, guys. Remember, you have great business on of you, and we wish you an amazing, great, blessed day, everybody.